Yeah, the shutdown is technically over for 3 weeks, but there's still so much uncertainty, and I think that's what's really worrying a lot of these market watchers and investors and economists that we're talking to. But when they do reopen, or if they do reopen permanently, we're going to have a lot of uncertainty there as well. Just we have no idea what's going to happen. I think that is really what's concerning everybody that's watching along.
Yeah, and it's clear. I mean, as we've talked about this, I guess from the beginning, obviously, no one knew how long this was going to drag on. It became the longest government shutdown in our nation's history, but we're seeing more and more of the impact that it's had, not just on federal workers, the 800,000 furloughed federal workers, but also the economy as a whole.
Well, I think that's a really great point to sort of focus on a little bit. If you think about the government as a client to so many small businesses throughout the country and how it affects those small businesses. I mean, these are folks who, rely on these jobs day in and day out, and we're not getting paid, or we're not actually starting the job. So think about, the one or two standard deviations away from just the 800,000 that actually got impacted. And I think we'll ultimately find out as we get closer to, the end of the second quarter what the real total impact was.
But also just the hit to the GDP, right? We're supposed to get Q4 GDP in this week. And though the short-term guess from economists is that it's not really going to impact GDP all too much, if we go back into a shutdown, it could really hurt global growth.
A double dip shutdown almost, if you want to call it that. A double dip of it. All right, well, the shutdown cost, speaking of it, the economy, it was a whopping $11 billion charge against it, including a permanent $3 billion loss, according to the Congressional Budget Office. And that number, of course, comes from the bipartisan government organization. Although most of the damage will be reversed as federal employees return to work, that $3 billion lost in permanent economic activity takes a good chunk out of the private sector. The report saying, quote, some private sector entities will never recoup the lost income. So Alfred, that more to your point, that even though as we see government workers get back pay, those private companies that work with these employees and the government in total might not ever recoup.
Well, just think of it this way. I didn't get paid for 3 weeks, right, or a month, and it doesn't change the number of months in a year. So out of 12 months, I was able to only earn for 11. So absolutely, there's certain permanent impact for the year at least.
And just how the shutdown also affected the IPO market. That was big as well. A big loss for a lot of companies that were looking to go public. And if the shutdown does continue further, then what are we going to hear about all the unicorns that wanted to go public,
Yeah, and I guess that was one of the things, because we talked about the IRS to a certain extent about delaying tax refunds. We've talked about the SEC delaying IPOs that were supposed to come in January. That's a huge wait. I mean, we've talked about the FAA, and we saw that with flights getting halted at LaGuardia. I mean, so many different government agencies feeling the impact.
Sure. I mean, I can't imagine the frustration of going to an airport and standing around for 3.5 hours simply because both parties can't, come to an agreement and make the government function.
But while it did hurt the consumers, it also hurt the businesses. Delta couldn't roll out their Airbus 220s because there was a lot of, matters that they couldn't get people to sign off on, and that was also big for the company.
And we heard from Southwest saying as well that they were seeing some impacts. And of course, anytime that you have safety a concern, who's going to want to fly? And that wasn't completely unexpected to see that as well. Well, the frustration that we've seen from federal workers